You're live. You're live.
So we're really going to do this, huh? Okay. So my name is Kerry Hefner. I'm the area horticulturist for the LSU Ag Center in Washington, covered Morehouse and Union parishes, and it's a beautiful sunny day here in we're kind of in western Washita Parish, and I thought what we would do today is we'll let some folks jump on and we'll do some pruning of fruit trees. Pruning is a topic that kind of freaks people out, and a lot of people are afraid to do it. And the goal is, after today, I hope you have more confidence to prune your own fruit trees, get them to be more productive, and have confidence in doing so. So today we're going to look at apple trees, and everyone thinks you can't grow apples in Louisiana, but you're about to see you can. And we're going to talk about some varieties you probably have not heard of, and show you different ages, some trees that have been in the ground for only a year, and we'll do that here on this property. And then we'll take a break and we'll go out to the big orchard, which is about a 20-minute drive for us south of here, and we'll reconvene on Facebook Live out there, and I'll show you some larger, older trees that are going to be a little more involved as far as pruning is concerned. So we have a good audience. Okay. So welcome everybody. So what I'm showing you, these are apple trees that were custom grafted. This is this first variety we're going to look at is an old North Carolina variety that dates back to the mid-1800s called Tony, Tony, and it's grafted onto a dwarfing rootstock. All of the apples we're going to look at on this property are going to be grafted onto a dwarfing rootstock. So these trees will never get taller than about 12, 15 feet tall, and hopefully with pruning we'll keep the size under control and keep them productive. So this is, let me just show you, this is the graft union right here. These trees are grafted onto a rootstock called Budagovsky 9 or Bud 9. And I'm very pleased with how this tree has branched out or feathered out. This was planted a little more than a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, in fact. It was planted in December of 2019. So I've been real pleased with how it's grown. When it arrived, it looked just like a stick, and you might think, my Lord, that'll never turn into an apple tree. But it had some beautiful growth on it this summer. And so for a tree this size, so it's been in the ground 1 year, but it was already a year old by the time I got it. So 2 years total, 1 year in the ground. It's put out a lot of lateral branches that you see here. And I want the tree to divert its resources to branches sort of higher up on the stem. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come in and just take off these laterals. Wow, that's nice and green. And you see how there's a kind of a ridge or a collar. Okay, there's kind of a ridge or a collar right here. I'm going to try to cut as close to that as possible and as parallel to that as possible, so the tree will seal the wound itself. Let's see. And that's, yeah, I'll go ahead and get that one. And that's all I'm going to do to that one. Now, that's really all that needs to be done. So those are called thinning cuts. And I'll show you some more of these when we move on to other trees. But basically you'll make two types of cuts when you're pruning your fruit trees. Thinning cuts, which is removing branches, and depending on how big the tree is, a tree this small, that's how big they are. On a larger tree, the branches might be a lot larger. And then there are heading cuts, which is heading back a branch to remove the terminal bud or the apical bud. I don't think I'm going to do any of that on this one. Now let me show you the difference between pruning and training branches. So now that I have those laterals off, I can put my guard back around here. For some reason, this property is rabbit city, and rabbits like to gnaw on apple trees. This is just some 2x4 wire that I can put down. And I have a very nice lateral branch right here that will make a nice scaffold branch. So I'm going to leave this one. Now, my goal is to get these laterals to be as horizontal as possible relative to the main vertical branch. And to do that, I'm going to start training this branch with a stick. So I'm going to zip tie this stick down to this this little cage I've made to put around the trunk to keep rabbits from chewing on the trunk of the apple tree. And then see, all I have to do is just fasten that branch down to this stick, and this crotch angle right here, that's called the crotch angle. We want that to be as close to 90 as we can get it. Sometimes it's possible to get it 90 degrees, sometimes it's not. That's okay. If you approach 60 degrees on that crotch angle, that's doing pretty well. So there we go. Now, I'm going to use a zip tie to go ahead and fasten this branch down. And I'm not going to clamp it down real tight, but I will keep an eye on how it grows. So, well, let's see. So I want well, sounds like some robins are getting frisky over in the cedar tree over there. There we go. So, and there we go. And that's all I'm going to do. I've left it sort of loose. And so we've got this lateral, or this scaffold branch, going as close to horizontal as we can get it. Your lateral branches are going to be your fruit producers. And so you want them to be able to get as much sunlight as they possibly can, and having them as close to horizontal as you can get them will maximize incident sunlight. Remember, with fruit trees, with any kind of fruit trees, whether it's apples, peaches, plums, doesn't matter, you're harvesting sunlight. Think of your leaves as being solar panels, and you're harvesting that sunlight, and the tree will divert that energy into flower and fruit production, and that's our goal. So I think that's all we're going to do with that tree. We'll move on to another one over here. I always try to plant at least two of everything. This is another Tony apple, and it's grown out real well. It has a few laterals on it down here. I'm just going to take those off. And there's a lateral up here. I think that's all I'm going to do with that one. I'm not going to do much more to that. Trees this size, you really don't want to do too much to. So, and I'll put my rabbit guard back around it. And there we go. All right, so we're done with those. All right, so we'll move up slope here a little bit. This is a really interesting apple tree. This is called Reverend Morgan. This is an apple that comes out of Houston, Texas. And that might not be a part of the world you might associate with apple production. It was just a chance discovery by, you guessed it, Reverend Morgan, back in the late 60s, early 70s. It's actually a seedling of Granny Smith. So Reverend Morgan got lucky. This is on a rootstock called Geneva 11 or G11, and it's already put out some very nice scaffold branches, some laterals. In fact, it looks like we might even have some flower buds here. This was planted in July of 2019. Not the optimum time to plant fruit trees, but we're very close to a water source out here, so keeping the trees watered at that part of the summer was not a problem. Not so out on the big orchard, and you'll see that when we get out there. So nice laterals, very nice central leader, which is this main stem growing vertically. We have some really vertical growth that we want to take off so the tree will put energy into the laterals, and that's this one, and it looks like this one as well. So all this growth growing straight up is really going to be hard to get to be productive. So we'll take this lower stuff off too. And it looks like I might even have a flower spur here. That's okay. I'm going to go ahead and take that off because I really want the tree to put energy into these upper scaffold branches. And it looks like they're doing that nicely. Now, with this growth I'm taking off, this is, let's see, from here, from that point right there, it looks like, for the rest of the way up is all 1 year growth. And so if you are into grafting your own fruit trees, this is very good material for Scion Wood. If you have rootstocks, you can graft this 1 year growth right onto your rootstock, and you'll have a new apple tree. So, and that's preferred for grafting is 1 year growth. So, and I think that's all we'll do to this one. Again, these trees that have been here for only a short time, we're really not going to do much with. But I'm very pleased with how this has grown out, how it's feathered out with scaffold branches. These branches are going to be very easy to train a little later on in the season. So, and these buds are just gorgeous. So now contrast that tree with this one. This is also Reverend Morgan, and for some reason this one's a lot ganglier than that one. So you can see right away that the number of cuts I made on that tree may not be the same as the number of cuts I make on this tree. No two trees are going to require identical cuts in terms of types of cut and number of cuts. So just because two trees, you don't cut the same number of branches off two trees, doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Different trees have different requirements. Each one is unique. So let's see. It may not be obvious, but I think this really windy branch right here is going to be my central leader. So I'm going to take off this material that's growing straight up. And again, if I had rootstocks and wanted to do some grafting, that would be excellent material for grafting. It's also the perfect time of year to do grafting too. This stuff is still dormant, and that's when you want to do grafting, while your Scion Wood is still dormant. We'll get rid of that one. And again, anything growing straight up, the goal is going to be to have a very open canopy, open to allow maximum sunlight penetration and maximum air circulation. So fungal pathogens can not be a problem. So let's see. And sometimes it's just hard to see right away. You can always come back and take more material off later with summer pruning. If you see you missed one during the dormant period, let's see now. Sometimes you just kind of have to stand back and give it the optical eyeball method here. Let's see, anything that's going to be up here in the interior of the canopy, we probably want to take off. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take that one off too.
Where would someone get rootstock if they were interested in grafting?
Okay, so you can find specialty growers that sell rootstock, like Willamette Nursery out in Oregon. My grower, the grower that I buy from, that I buy grafted trees from up in the Carolinas, has a limited amount of rootstock available every year. So you can go online and go to your search engine and just type in apple rootstock for sale, and you'll come up with several results right away. Some people plant apple seeds and choose to grow their own rootstock. Some people plant on seedling rootstock. Things like Geneva 11, which comes out of Cornell, or Bud 9, those are clonally produced rootstocks. They've been genetically tested to make sure the ID is correct. And so you can find specialty growers out there too who, let's see, let me clean that cut up a little more. There we go. So, and I think for right now, we'll leave this Reverend Morgan alone and see how he buds out this spring. And if I see that I need to come in and kind of clean it up a little bit, you can always do that. You can always come back and take off more if you see something you might have missed. Again, the idea is just to keep the interior of the tree as open as possible, and you want to generate as many lateral branches as possible because those are going to be your flower and fruit producers. And I think that's all we need to do to these. So what we're going to do now is walk down to another area where there are some, it's another variety grafted onto another rootstock. And I'm going to grab my loppers because I might need those.
All of this including now being a good time for pruning apples to young citrus trees as well. Can you prune now, all of that?
Sure, yeah, now is a good time. Of course, citrus, we don't grow a lot of citrus up here in North Louisiana in Ouachita Parish, but now is the time while everything is still dormant, prune apples, plums, peaches. As much as possible, I try to prune to a central leader system. With peaches, you're going to prune to something called an open center system. That's how peach trees have that characteristic wine glass shape. But you can prune peaches also to a central leader system. Let me jump in front here.
How aggressive do I need to be with an older pear with just a carrot on our rootstock?
Well,
Very thick and gnarly, not sure if it's been trimmed at all.
Yeah, and pear trees are notorious for growing straight up. They put on a lot of vertical growth. So as long as it's dormant, you can be pretty aggressive with it. We generally recommend not taking off more than about a third of the tree at a time. But pear trees you kind of have to muscle down on. So
Lateral branches on peach trees as well.
sometimes you have to. When you plant a peach tree, like for example, when a commercial grower plants a peach tree, they plant it as a grafted whip. It's called a whip, and it's not much more than a year or two old. It's just a single stick, kind of like the Tony apple was. And so they plant that and then come in immediately, and at about knee height, they lock that thing off, and that enables the tree to put out laterals. And that's how commercial growers achieve that. It's a little harder to do if you bought a tree that's already 2 or 3 years old from a retail nursery. Like say if it's in a 3 or 7 gallon pot, they have not been pruned to an open center center system, and so it's a little harder to get a handle on, but it can be done.
Someone's asking, are we going to be doing larger trees later?
Oh yes. So what we're going to do, for those of you just joining us, we're going to prune these smaller trees, and then we'll go out to the big orchard, which is about a 20-minute drive from here. So we'll take a little break, and then we'll hop back on Facebook Live when we...
Tell them it will be recorded so they can watch it later.
Okay, yeah, and it will be recorded so you can watch it later if you have to go and can't make the segment for the larger trees. But as soon as we do these, we're going to go out to the big orchard and do trees that are up to 4 years old. So, and you'll see quite a difference. Now, this is one I grafted, and don't do what I did and lose the tag. I'm reasonably certain this is an apple called Arkansas Black. Reasonably certain, not 100%. And so, lesson learned there. And this one has grown beyond my wildest expectations. So on this 2-year growth right here, we see what looks like a lot of spurs, and those are going to be our flowers, hopefully, and hopefully some fruit. Arkansas Black is a triploid, so you have to have another variety to pollinate it, and it's also prone to come out a little later than some of the rest, but the apples hang on until well into November. Named Arkansas Black because the apples are so red, they have a very dark color to them. So it's a good keeper. And let's see, we've got, I think I'll use this older growth as the central leader. And so we've got some vertical growth here that I might be better off using my loppers on. So let me jump around to this side. And again, if I was going to do some grafting, this material would be ideal. There we go. And so you see, as opposed to this 2-year growth, these are all vegetative buds. You can see the difference between a vegetative bud, how it's pressed right up next to the wood here, as opposed to what I hope are flowering buds. They stick out on spurs like that. And this is 2nd-year growth right here. So let's see, what else? And so we'll start this summer. I'll start training these branches to improve the crotch angles here. So this might be a good place to demonstrate a heading cut. What I just did was another thinning cut. That is, I removed the entire branch. And the idea behind a heading cut is to remove this terminal bud that produces a growth regulator or a plant hormone that travels down the stem and suppresses lateral branch growth. If you remove the source of that hormone, you'll encourage the growth of laterals. And so I'm going to come back to a bud that is facing me, and let's go down to about there and cut there, okay? And yeah, so there's a bud back here facing me, and so now that bud will grow out. It'll grow a branch out this way and put out a new lateral. So let's see. I'm just going to take this whole thing off right there. And here's one that's trying to grow as vertical as it possibly can. So let's head this one back to there. Okay, so there's a bud. You're always cutting back to a bud. And so that bud will come out and hopefully put out a branch that will grow this way.
Somebody said I noticed the the cuts are not necessarily angled according to any method. Can you discuss?
Right. You'll see some books or some guides will say you have to cut at a 45-degree angle. It really doesn't matter. I try to cut parallel to the bud. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I know when I buy trees from the grower I shop from up in the Carolinas, I get 1 year or 2 year whips that are cut off just as flat as they can be on top. So, and you see they do fine. So I don't think the cut being angled really matters. Let's see. I think I'm going to leave this one at that. Again, this is second year in the ground. I don't want to take too much off, but I think that's all I'm going to do. So, and again, I can always come back later on when it fills out, when it leafs out, and I see if the canopy is going to be real congested. I can always come in and thin that out a little later. So, so I'm not too worried about that one. I rather like what I'm left with here. So, okay. So that's Arkansas Black. I think the rootstock for this one is called M7, if I remember right. Again, don't lose your tags. Very important. Okay. Now, this is a variety that you'll hear me talk about again over in the big orchard. This is a southern apple called Summer Banana. It is a South Carolina apple. And this was planted a year ago, and you see how vigorous this variety is. It's grafted onto Bud 9 rootstock, and I just couldn't be more pleased with how this tree has performed. We'll just point out a couple of things. Gorgeous scaffolds, but you see I have 3 branches all right here together that are growing vertically and competing to be the central leader. So I only want one to be the central leader, and I think I want this larger one to be it. Now, and you can see where the grower cut it off originally. So I have a scaffold coming out this way. So I'm going to take this scaffold off right here. I better get my glasses on. And there we go. Okay. And again, I'm not hurting the tree. Wonderful material if I was going to use this for Scion Wood. And again, we just want to keep the canopy, the interior part of the tree, as cleared out as possible. So here's one growing straight up. If I take this one off, I'll be able to train these two to start getting them to get as horizontal as possible. So we'll just take the one growing off the top here. And now we have a situation here where we have a scaffold on the bottom of this lateral and one on top. And we'll get into a situation after leaf out where the one on top will be shading out the one under it. So looks like I might have a couple flower buds there. That's okay. There will be more. And we'll take that one off. Okay, so we've made 3 thinning cuts on this tree, and now we're ready to do some heading cuts because we want these laterals to make laterals. Okay, so, and again, here's the terminal bud where that growth regulator is produced, and so I don't want these trees to be huge. So let's see. I think I'll come back to the bud right there. You see, just above my thumb and facing me, there's a bud. And so, let's see. There we go. And that's a heading cut. Okay? And so that's what we're going to do now is just heading cuts. and heading cut. And we just go around the tree. Heading cut. And let's see, heading cut. Okay, I like it. One more over here on this side. And heading cut. Okay, now we've got a wonderful series of scaffolds at this level. So we want our central leader to make more scaffolds. And so I've already measured the central leader from the apical or the terminal bud all the way down to where it's attached to the main trunk. It's about 60 inches. And I'm going to take about a third off of this. I'm going to head it back to about a third. Let's see. And I want to come back to a bud. Let's see. Let's come back to that one. There we go. And so that's going to encourage this central leader to put out more lateral branches at bud break. So, and that's all we do. And now we're ready to start training these branches. We already have some wonderful crotch angles right here. So we'll be ready to come in and start training these down horizontal like this. Now you might ask, should I take this lowest one off because it's going to be shaded by the one above it? I'm going to leave it for right now. If I see that it needs to come off after leaf out, I can always come back and take that one off. I'm just going to leave that one for right now. So, and we'll train the branches just like this. So, okay. All right, let's see. Let's go down and look at one that sustained some hurricane damage, okay? And that'll be another summer banana. We'll leave the persimmon tree alone for right now. So, in growing apples, here I was worried about cedar apple rust, apple scab, any number of other pathogen type problems. I didn't count on a Category 1 hurricane coming through Ouachita Parish, but it did. It took this tree out altogether. I've already replaced it with another summer banana. And then the tree we're going to work on next really sustained some damage. In fact, I'm not going to be surprised if at some point I just have to pull this tree out entirely. But this branch, this scaffold branch was all scraped up. And the tree got basically pushed over, so I've had to straighten it back up. So we're going to try to do some things to help it out here. First thing I'm going to do is take off this branch at the bottom that's growing almost straight up vertically. Okay, and now this branch, the scaffold branch that has sustained some damage here, I could just leave it alone and keep an eye on it, but you can see how this branch was really scraped up. But you can also see how the tree tried to seal the wound, all that callous tissue right there. This bothers me, and I think I'm going to go ahead and be proactive and just remove that whole thing. And I think that'll help this tree out a lot. Okay, so now we're ready to start looking at some heading cuts on these scaffolds. Always cut back to a bud. Whoops, don't do that. There we go. So heading cut, and let's see. There might come a time when this whole branch right here has to come off. I'm going to leave it for right now, though. Let's see. There's a bud facing outward. There we go. And this branch is real vigorous, so let's head this back. to about there. Okay. Now you can also see two branches here, each one trying to be a central leader. The one behind the main branch, behind this main vertical, is actually taller, but I'm also trying to control for size, which is part of the goal of pruning. So I think I'm going to select this more interior vertical to be the central leader, and I'm going to get rid of this this other one. There's also some damage down here on this lateral that's going to be a problem. And there's also some on this one. And again, I might have to come in and just take that whole thing off. This is one of those trees I'm just going to have to keep an eye on. If I see it start having real problems, I can take it out and replace it with something else. No problem. There we go. And yeah, that's going to really, I hope, help this tree out. Now we're going to encourage more laterals by heading back this leader. So there we go. So that looks like it's going to be a little more manageable. We have to think in terms of the energy budget for this tree. What do we want the tree to put its energy and resources into? And one that's been kind of beaten up a little bit by the storms needs to recover. So I think we'll call that one done for right now. And again, I'll just have to keep an eye on it as we go through bud break and see how it does. I'm also going to try to straighten it up a little more. With the hurricane, a lot of the trees were just pushed over. They weren't uprooted, so standing them back up has been fairly simple. But the one over there was snapped off below the graft union, so there was no point in trying to save that one. But I replaced it with another summer banana, so no problem. So okay, so that's grafting 1 and 2 year old trees. Now what we're going to do is take a little break, and we'll go out to the big orchard and look at some older trees. There's some trees out there that are now 4 years old, and we've already had some apple production off of them, so it's been exciting out there. But you'll see several more varieties, and you'll see the difference between a dwarfing and a semi-dwarfing rootstock, and you'll see how vigorous this summer banana variety really is on a semi-dwarfing rootstock. Okay, so are any questions?
We don't have any more. Can you tell me resources for pruning through the Ag Center?
Okay, if you just go to, so if you want to see how to prune a fig bush, you can go to YouTube, search for LSU Ag Center fig pruning, and my colleague down in Orleans Parish, Chris Dunaway, has done an excellent video on how to prune fig trees. A lot of people have questions about those. In just general pruning, you can go to lsuagcenter.com and type in fruit tree pruning, and some articles will come up. You can also go to the Home Orchard publication, and I think we're in the process of updating that publication, so that'll be nice when that's finally done. And then you can go to I know the University of Georgia also has a good publication on pruning fruit trees. So
we got one more question.
Uh-huh.
I have an older satsuma tree that has 2 fairly long branches that are dead. Should I cut them down to the trunk of the tree?
Sounds like, yeah. If you just lop off a tree without thinking about cutting back to a bud, and you see a lot of that with like oak trees, for example, you're opening that wound up to fungal infections and potential problems. Now again, my colleague Anna Timmerman might be a better resource for satsuma and other types of citrus. We just don't grow a lot of that here in North Louisiana, so it's not something I deal with on a regular basis. But it sounds like you have the right idea there. Go ahead and take the branch off back where it connects to the main part of the tree. You should see a branch collar, which is kind of a raised area right at the base of the branch, kind of at the connection between the branch and the main part, the main trunk, and you want to cut parallel to that branch collar, and the tree will heal the wound itself. I get asked a lot, do you have to spray anything on the wound after you cut it? And no, you don't. If you make the cut correctly, the tree will heal the wound itself. So.
How do you protect the bark on young trees? We have mice that gnaw the bark.
Yeah, so, well, if you look over here, we have a rogue deer in this area that will come around. Hasn't gnawed on anything yet, but this is how I keep deer off. This is how I keep rabbits. When I planted the trees out in the big orchard, I had the black drain pipe, like you see right there, cut into 2-foot sections that I just put that around the trunk when they were real young, and that seemed to keep critters off of them with no problem.
So tell them we'll be back in 30 minutes to an hour.
Okay, so we'll be back in about an hour. We're going to cut here and adjourn to the big orchard, which is about a 20-minute drive, and it'll take some time for us to get set up. So we'll see you in about an hour out at the big orchard.